On the evening of January 13th, 2012, a ship prepared to leave port. Its name was Costa Concordia, one of the largest liners in Italy. Over 3,000 passengers had boarded for a week at sea. Families, couples, retirees, many on their first cruise. More than 1,000 crew members worked to make the voyage smooth. No one on board suspected what the night would bring. The ship pulled away from Civitavecchia just after 7 in the evening. The Mediterranean was calm, the air cool and clear. Passengers gathered for dinner as the coastline slipped into darkness. Waiters moved between tables. Wine was poured. Laughter carried through the halls. Below deck, engineers monitored instruments in a quiet, steady rhythm. On the bridge, the captain reviewed the ship's planned route north. It was a route he had sailed many times before. But tonight, he had something else in mind. As the ship passed near the island of Giglio, the captain gave an order. He wanted to sail closer to the shore, a gesture known as a salute. It was a tradition among some captains, a way to greet the island. The ship's horn would sound, lights would flash, residents would wave from shore. It was not part of the approved route, but the captain believed the maneuver was safe, one he had done before. He steered the ship toward the darkened coastline. Onboard computers displayed the safe distance the ship should keep from land. The captain adjusted course, bringing the vessel far closer than charted. Officers on the bridge exchanged quiet words, watching the depth readings shift. Below the surface, hidden by darkness, lay a jagged reef known as the Scole. It had wrecked ships before, and fishermen knew to avoid it. The Concordia continued forward, cutting through calm black water. No warning came in time. At 9:45 in the evening, the ship's hull struck rock. The impact tore a gash more than 200 feet long. Passengers felt a sudden, violent shudder move through the floor. Glasses fell from tables, lights flickered, and the ship groaned under stress. Few understood what had happened. Many assumed it was minor. In truth, seawater was already rushing into the lower decks. The Concordia had struck the reef at Scole, exactly where local sailors feared. Below deck, the engine rooms began flooding within minutes. 5 watertight compartments filled rapidly, far more than the ship was built to survive. Generators failed one by one as water reached the electrical systems. The ship lost power completely, plunging corridors and cabins into darkness. Crew members scrambled with flashlights, trying to understand the damage. On the bridge, officers realized the situation was far worse than a simple collision. The Concordia was dying beneath them. With the blackout, the ship drifted without engines or steering. Wind and current slowly pushed the Concordia back toward the island. Inside, passengers wandered dark hallways, uncertain what to do next. Announcements were delayed, vague, and offered little real information. Crew members, many undertrained for such an emergency, struggled to respond. Confusion spread faster than the water below decks. Still, no order had been given to abandon ship. Nearly 45 minutes passed between the collision and any official alarm. For those on board, that gap became the most dangerous part of the night. Some passengers pieced together the danger from the ship's growing tilt. They chose to move toward the upper decks on their own. Others waited, trusting the crew would guide them once instructions arrived. Meanwhile, the captain relayed conflicting reports to Coast Guard officials on shore. He described only a blackout, not the extent of the flooding. As water filled the lower decks, the Concordia began to lean. The tilt grew slowly at first, then became impossible to ignore. Furniture slid across floors, dishes shattered, passengers grabbed railings to stay upright. Stairwells turned into steep, awkward climbs as the angle increased. Crew members tried to direct people toward muster stations, per safety protocol. But many passengers had never been shown where those stations were. The mandatory safety briefing had been scheduled for the next morning. On shore, Coast Guard officials grew suspicious of the captain's vague reports. Local residents on Giglio had already seen the ship listing from their windows. Some called emergency services themselves, describing what they saw happening offshore. The mismatch between the captain's words and the visible danger raised alarm. Coast Guard vessels began preparing to respond, unsure of the full situation. Meanwhile, aboard the Concordia, the tilt had passed 20 degrees. Walking upright was becoming difficult across much of the ship. Coast Guard officials radioed the Concordia repeatedly, demanding clear answers. The captain's responses remained inconsistent, describing only a technical failure. He requested tugboats, suggesting the ship might still recover on its own. But data from the ship's black box later told a different story. Officers on the bridge already understood the flooding was severe and spreading. The delay in an honest report cost precious time for rescue planning. Every minute the truth was withheld, the danger for those on board grew. Eventually, the scale of the emergency could no longer be hidden. Coast Guard vessels were dispatched from the mainland and nearby stations. Helicopters were placed on standby, ready to assist in the dark. Local fishermen and boat owners on Giglio began preparing their own vessels. Word spread quickly through the small island community that a ship was in trouble. Many islanders had grown up around these waters and knew the danger of night rescues. They readied blankets, boats, and flashlights before any official call for help arrived. The order to abandon ship finally came, more than an hour after impact. By then, the Concordia's list made evacuation extremely difficult. On the low side of the ship, lifeboats hung uselessly against the hull. Crew members worked to launch what boats they could from the high side. Passengers queued in darkness, many wearing life jackets over pajamas or light clothing. Children were passed hand to hand between crew members and strangers alike. Panic rose, but so did moments of quiet courage among passengers helping each other. Some lifeboats lowered successfully, carrying dozens of survivors toward the island. Others became stuck, swinging against the ship's steel hull in the dark. Crew members shouted instructions over the noise of shifting metal and rushing water. Elderly passengers were carried down stairwells that had become nearly vertical. The ship's power flickered on and off, plunging corridors into sudden blackness. Outside, the January sea was cold enough to threaten hypothermia within minutes. Still, the evacuation continued, deck by deck, family by family. For some, the lifeboats were never an option in time. As the ship tilted further, sections of deck became impossible to cross safely. A number of passengers chose to jump directly into the freezing water below. Others climbed down ropes or ladders improvised by crew members in the chaos. The distance to shore was short, but the cold made every stroke difficult. Nearby boats from the island began pulling survivors from the water. Some of the youngest and oldest passengers required the most careful rescue. On Giglio's shoreline, residents waded into the shallows to help exhausted swimmers. Blankets were wrapped around shivering survivors as they reached solid ground. Local cafes and homes opened their doors, offering warmth and dry clothing. Volunteers who had never met these strangers treated them like family that night. Meanwhile, the ship continued to tilt, eventually resting on its side entirely. Not everyone made it off before the Concordia settled against the seabed. The night's rescue effort would stretch on for hours more. As the evacuation continued, reports emerged that the captain had left the ship. He later claimed he had fallen from the deck into a lifeboat by accident. Investigators would find little evidence to support that account. Meanwhile, hundreds of passengers and crew remained aboard, still searching for a way off. A Coast Guard commander, monitoring the chaos from shore, demanded the captain return. The exchange between them would later become one of the most discussed moments of the disaster. The captain did not return to oversee the evacuation. Without their captain, remaining crew members took charge of the final evacuations. Officers moved through flooded corridors, checking cabins for anyone left behind. Some passengers had hidden in bathrooms or closets, paralyzed by fear. Crew members pulled them out, guiding them toward the last working exits. The ship's tilt now made even simple movement a dangerous task. Rescue teams from shore boarded the wreck to assist directly. Hours after the first impact, the ship was still not fully evacuated. By midnight, dozens of rescue boats surrounded the wreck. Helicopters swept the coastline with searchlights, looking for survivors in the water. Divers prepared to enter flooded sections of the ship once it was safe. Coast Guard teams coordinated with local fishermen who knew the waters best. Temperatures continued to drop, adding urgency to every search effort. Some survivors were found clinging to debris far from where the ship had struck. Others had already reached the island on their own, exhausted but alive. As dawn approached, the full scale of the disaster became visible. The Costa Concordia lay on its side, half submerged near the island's harbor. More than 4,000 people had been aboard when the ship struck the reef. Most had been rescued through the night, but not everyone was accounted for. Officials began compiling lists of the missing, cross-checking names against passenger manifests. Families on shore waited anxiously for news of loved ones. The search for those still missing would continue for weeks. By morning, the scale of the wreck was clear to the world. The Concordia rested on an underwater ledge, its side exposed to the sky. News crews arrived on Giglio, and images of the ship spread globally. Divers began entering the vessel, searching flooded decks for anyone still trapped. The work was slow and dangerous, hampered by debris and shifting furniture. Every cabin had to be checked, every corridor searched by hand. The ship that once carried holiday travelers was now a search site. In the days that followed, search teams recovered the first bodies. Some were found near the water, others deep within the ship's interior. Divers worked in complete darkness inside flooded corridors, guided only by touch and instinct. Officials confirmed that dozens remained missing as the operation continued. The identities of the dead were confirmed slowly, out of respect for the families. Among the missing was a young waiter and an elderly couple. Grief settled over the island community that had worked so hard to help. Search efforts continued for months as engineers assessed the wreck's stability. A mini-submarine was used to reach decks too dangerous for divers alone. Several bodies were recovered from areas near the ship's lower lifeboat deck. Among them were an elderly couple and the disaster's youngest victim, a 5-year-old girl. Each recovery brought a small measure of closure to grieving families. Yet several people remained unaccounted for as the salvage operation moved forward. The ship itself had become both a crime scene and an engineering challenge. As preparations began to right the ship, more remains were discovered. Investigators worked carefully, aware that recovery and salvage now had to proceed together. Every section of the hull was mapped before heavy equipment could be used. Local authorities pledged that no area would be sealed off before a full search. The process reflected a quiet promise made to the families of the missing. No one would be left behind in the wreck if it could be helped. The investigation into how the disaster happened was also gathering pace on land. In 2013, the captain of the Costa Concordia stood trial in Grosseto. He faced charges of manslaughter, causing the wreck, and abandoning ship. Prosecutors argued that his decision to sail close to Giglio caused the disaster. They also argued that his delayed and misleading reports cost lives. The captain maintained that he had done what he could in the chaos. Survivors and victims' families attended the hearings, seeking answers and accountability. The trial captured global attention as details of that night were laid bare. Evidence included recordings from the ship's black box, capturing tense exchanges that night. Investigators presented the ship's charted course against its actual, unauthorized path. Witnesses described the confusion, the darkness, and the desperate scramble to survive. In 2015, the captain was found guilty on all major charges. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison for his role in the disaster. Other crew members and a company executive had already accepted lesser plea deals. For many survivors, the verdict offered a measure of long-awaited justice. Refloating the Concordia became the largest maritime salvage operation ever attempted. Engineers built underwater platforms to support the ship's massive weight. In September 2013, after months of preparation, the ship was slowly rotated upright. The operation took 19 hours and involved hundreds of skilled workers. Cameras from around the world captured the moment the hull rose from the seabed. For the people of Giglio, it marked the end of a long, difficult chapter. The wreck that had dominated their island for over a year finally stood straight. The following year, the Concordia was fitted with massive flotation tanks. Tugboats guided the ship slowly across the sea toward Genoa for scrapping. Thousands watched from the shore as the wreck completed its final voyage. Inside, workers continued searching compartments that had remained inaccessible for years. The last body, that of a waiter named Russell Rebello, was found during dismantling. His discovery closed one of the last unresolved chapters of the tragedy. By 2017, the ship that once sailed the Mediterranean no longer existed. 32 people lost their lives in the Costa Concordia disaster. Their names are remembered each year on the island of Giglio. The tragedy led to sweeping changes in cruise ship safety regulations worldwide. Mandatory safety briefings before departure became standard across the industry. New international rules improved how ships are designed to survive flooding. Investigators and engineers studied the wreck for years to prevent future disasters. The Concordia became a case study in how small decisions can have vast consequences. For the survivors, the memory of that night has never fully faded. Many have spoken publicly about the confusion, fear, and courage they witnessed. The residents of Giglio, too, carry the memory of the night they became rescuers. Fishermen, shopkeepers, and families opened their homes to total strangers in crisis. Today, the reef at Scole remains marked on every nautical chart. It stands as a quiet warning to ships that pass too close to shore. The story of the Costa Concordia endures as one of the sea's hardest lessons.